excited to clear problems because it came pre-installed on people's computers. The same thing works with Microsoft Office and all their other software. It all made Microsoft so good that they could buy out the competition and become a massive conglomerate. By the time the 2000s rolled around and Bill Gates finally stepped down, they were absolutely massive. But where could they take it next? Well, Steve Ballmer, the heir to the Microsoft throne, tried to shift the company's focus to hardware. Microsoft tried making their own PCs and mobile phones, expanding into the hardware markets, but they never really got a proper foothold. It was a mixture of crushing failures and severely limited successes. The company was stagnant and they couldn't use the same tricks they had before to get control over the market. The industry wasn't new enough, so Microsoft gave Ballmer a lot of time and a lot of room to work, but it just never turned around, and for nearly 15 years, Microsoft was simply dead in the water. They never lost their Windows monopoly, but they never really gained anything else either. So when he eventually stepped down in 2014, the share prices actually went up by 10%. Because of his ownership stock, retiring made Steve nearly $1 billion overnight. One of the only parts of the company that was actually performing well in the early 2010s was their cloud computing services. The division had been growing quickly under the relatively new management of Microsoft veteran Nadella, where revenue increased by $4 billion in literally just under 3 years. Not many were surprised when he was named CEO in 2014, but they were surprised by what he did next, as he had a vision for Microsoft and its future. Instead of focusing on Windows or their other consumer-facing products, he was going to focus Microsoft on 3 new areas of the tech world. These were his old departments of cloud computing along with virtual reality and artificial intelligence. Since then, Microsoft's share price has increased by 1000%. It's an absolutely staggering, insane number. And if you believe the hype, then it's all thanks to one man, Nadella. But to be more realistic, it wasn't.
Echten Waldviertler Genuss, den gibt's bei der Backwelt Pilz. Seit Generationen sind wir im Waldviertel zu Hause und stellen hier hochwertiges Brot und Gebäck her. Aus überwiegend regionalen Rohstoffen und 100% österreichischem Getreide. So halten wir Transportwege kurz. Wir arbeiten ausschließlich mit umweltfreundlichem Strom. Rund 30% davon produzieren wir sogar selbst. Auf einer Kollektorfläche von fast 6.900 Quadratmetern erzeugen wir mit über 3.200 PV-Modulen bis zu 1.500 Kilowatt Peak CO2-neutralen Solarstrom. Auch die Bienen fühlen sich bei uns wohl. Kein Wunder, dass unser Brot und Gebäck nachhaltig besser schmeckt. Unsere hochwertigen Backwaren liefern wir vorgebacken und tiefgekühlt frei Haus. Individuell, flexibel und schnell. Die
Microsoft had been running and they've done it by falling back on their old trade, becoming the ultimate middleman in the tech world.
We create technology so that others can create more technology. That's who we are, we're tool makers. And in a world right today where every walk of life and every
company culture was one of stability. It was a rare oasis in the tech world. Software engineers knew that Microsoft was a safe haven. The pay may be a bit lower, but you could expect much more stability. The ability to get a mortgage or settle down without worrying if you'd get cold in a year's time for shareholder optics. But in his first year, around 2014 and 2015, he fired around 18,000 people, which was 14% of the entire company at the time, which continued on with 8,000 in 2015, close to 5,000 the next year, and around 3,000 to 4,000 the year after that. But it wasn't because the company needed to save money, it was just to change the company culture. Instead of offering the carrots, Nadella was going to brandish the stick, and by regularly purging low performers, he put a fire under employees' feet and extracted every ounce of work that he could from them. And to be fair, judging him on the results, he's clearly a formidable CEO, equipped with an eerie ability to see into the future. but his overall strategy for the company really wasn't that unique. And it's just a game plan that all other companies in the last decade have used to skyrocket their stock price while extracting as much value as possible from their employees, and then their customers, and finally from their business relationships. We're of course talking about a process known today as end-shitification. The term was coined by the technology blogger and author WARHAMMER. In his recent book on the subject, he explains how it unfolds in online platforms in 3 easy steps. Step 1, first the platforms are good to their users. Step 2, then they companies like Reddit or even more top-heavy are almost completely focused on just their online platform. Microsoft is different though. Today, their revenue spread looks like this. Crucially, what you'll notice is that Windows now makes up less than 10% of their revenue. What's more, it's growing much more slowly than other parts of the company, meaning it'll probably be an even smaller percentage in just a few years' time. This all then means that other than maintaining their monopoly, Microsoft really doesn't care about Windows itself. They know how annoying it would be for you to switch right now, and they also care far less than they used to about Windows in general. This has let them take to platform decay far further than any other tech company has. For decades, they focused on step 1 and kept Windows working cleanly and
Alles muss ich hier selber machen. Ich finde einfach keine passenden Mitarbeitenden. Aber das hält fit. Absicht. Auch Absicht.
Indeed, statt Ausreden. Jetzt die richtigen Mitarbeitenden finden und 75 € Startguthaben sichern. Mit Indeed hast du's im Griff.
Sanitär, Wasser, Wärme, hallo? Geht nicht mehr. Warm, Heizung. Im Heizraum. Okay, Moment. Nee, ich habe jetzt gerade keinen Notdienst. Sagen Sie mal kurz Ihren Namen. Ja, da habe ich Sie. Ich gucke jetzt mal kurz in Ihren Heizraum rein. Ja, wir haben den Heizraum in 3D von Ihnen. Da gucke ich jetzt kurz rein, was wir da haben. Genau, also sind Sie gerade unten im Heizraum drin? Sind Sie drin? Ja, wunderbar, super. Da sehen Sie die Pumpe, genau da, ja? Ja, richtig? Und da drücken Sie jetzt mal den Aus-Einschalter, dass wir die neu starten. Genau. 5 Minuten warten, dann gucken und mir Bescheid geben, ob es geklappt hat. Dankeschön, tschüss. Okay, okay. Ich weiß, es wird niemals so sein, dass wir keine Techniker brauchen oder niemand hinfährt und alle Notdienste, alle Serviceanrufe bequem aus dem Büro mit einer virtuellen
Büro! Jetzt drücke ich am Überspringen.
Die Frage ist, wenn es nur bei jedem
Am Balkon.
We all remember how simple and easy it was to be on Windows 7 and Windows XP. That was back when the monopoly actually seemingly mattered to them. But in recent years, especially since Nadella came to power, that all changed and they began step 2 of the platform decay process. In fact, it actually played into its overall long-term goal for Microsoft itself, as we'll find out later. The release of Windows 8 was the first time that Microsoft intentionally added features that made Windows worse for their own gain. It was all based on the start screen. When you turn on your computer with Windows 8 running, you'd see this menu first instead of your normal desktop. People just hated it. While sort of useful on tablets or phones, it was just terrible for desktops. It was yet another obstacle to click through, to get to the desktop and actually use the useful parts of your own computer. But it was great for advertisements and for linking to other companies' websites. At the same time, they also released the Windows Store, and the UI of Windows 8 was designed to put it front and center. All the apps on the hated Windows 8 start screen were from the store, and it constantly pushed more of these apps onto people's faces. This is classic step 2 of the platform decay process, making the user experience worse to serve third-party business interests. In a major update later on, they sidelined the start menu and gave people the option to skip it entirely on startup. Back then, Windows was still a large part of the business, so they couldn't afford the negative reputation of just completely ignoring their customers. But this didn't really last, as the new CEO's vision saw cloud services expand massively. Microsoft started buying chips by bulk, using them to create massive server banks. Regular people, but also mostly other companies, then rent that server space to run their own code and store their own data. But demand grew so quickly that cloud services soon became their biggest revenue source by far. They were among the first to start the massive data center investment arms race. Microsoft was trying to build yet another monopoly, although other juggernauts like Amazon were also in the running. Meanwhile, Windows became a smaller and smaller part of the company, so small that they could practically do whatever they wanted. With no real competition to worry about, Microsoft was sure they could push people as hard as they liked. And Windows 11 is the culmination of this process. Years of platform decay have made it a shadow of its former self. The whole user experience is just terrible, and it begins before you've even installed it. First, there's the push for online-only installations and daily use. Recently, Microsoft made it harder for people to install Windows 11 without attaching a Microsoft account. Now you need two separate commands to get past the Connect an Account page. Why did they do this? Well, so they can sell you more stuff in the installation page, like cloud storage for backups, or their Edge browser, or Microsoft 365, or just a game board. Once you've found all the hidden no boxes to check and you've actually got Windows installed, you might find that your PC is running slower than you expected, as Windows 11 uses a lot more RAM than its predecessors. This is partially due to a new technique they've quietly been focusing on called preloading. Instead of leaving most of Windows in your computer's main storage banks, Windows keeps lots of it ready to go and stored in your RAM instead. This makes it slightly faster when you want to open the File Explorer, for example, but it does come at a massive cost. RAM is precious. Compared to regular storage, you only have so much of it. Intensive programs like web browsers and games use tons of RAM. The search function in File Explorer is another example. It's plainly obvious people don't want to find web results or random advertisements when they search on their computer. They just want to find a specific file or program. Microsoft changed it anyway, hoping to push more users onto their own web browser or to satisfy their business customers with a few more clicks. But one of the biggest signs of platform decay in Windows is the bloatware. Now when you install Windows, you get all sorts of other apps and shortcuts added in, like a tab for LinkedIn, another Microsoft subsidiary, or their new AI Copilot software, which now comes pre-installed. Pushing these other more profitable parts of the Microsoft conglomerate is the new purpose of Windows. They're cashing in their monopoly to try and sell people on their software for hire model of business. That's where the data centers come in. They're the infrastructure they need to eventually sell home computing as a subscription, while also selling vast amounts of space and processing power to AI companies as well. Once they have that in place, they can finally move on to step 3 and squeeze other companies as well. The scale is absolutely staggering. This year alone, Microsoft is spending $80 billion on these data centers. They're obsessed because the demand is getting so high. All the AI bubble startups and random companies need more and more computing power. In just one fiscal quarter, or about 3 months, revenue from these data centers jumped by 33%. This is why Nvidia is so massive now, and why Microsoft is so massive now. They're all just ballooned up, because, to use a common analogy, Nvidia makes shovels for the gold rush and Microsoft buys them in bulk before renting them out to all the hopeful AI prospectors. This is what Nadella envisioned all those years ago. They are becoming the ultimate middleman now, with OpenAI reportedly aiming for a $750 million valuation. That's a big 20%. To many investors, it seems like the sun will just never set on the Microsoft empire. But maybe all of this is just a bit too good to be true. Is Microsoft big, or just massively overinflated? It isn't just that Nadella has taken all of Microsoft's eggs and put them in the AI basket. The market thinks he actually has 10 times more eggs than he did a decade ago. Then all of these possibly imaginary eggs have been out in the basket as well. If they ever drop the basket, if the bubble pops, the whole company would fall apart from the massive crushing loss. It's an even bigger problem for the AI companies that Microsoft owns, like OpenAI. Sam Altman has desperately been trying to finish, something he still hasn't managed and hasn't got anywhere near close to doing. It seems like only a miracle can take their around $4 billion revenue and make it match their $500 to $750 billion valuation. This same logic also applies to all of the AI companies that are currently buying server space from Microsoft. If the bubble does pop soon, they nearly all go under and Microsoft is left without any customers. Then there's the problem that they don't have a monopoly. There's Google, X, Meta, Apple, even OpenAI if they get out from under Nadella's iron grip. There's already so many competitors for the AI crown, all of which have unique advantages over Microsoft. And even if AI does turn out to be the massive industrial revolution that the tech world seems to believe in, it doesn't guarantee Microsoft's future either if someone else wins the race. And finally, even if they do survive the bubble, they might have lost the one thing they could always rely on. Windows has become so awful, so decayed that people are actually beginning to switch. Take a look at this chart, first shared on Reddit by user Still the Age. It covers the last 5 years of the operating system market among Steam users, based on their annual hardware surveys. While Linux remained stagnant for years, it has actually finally begun gaining market share, almost tripling from 1% to 3%. Then you have to consider that the Steambox and SteamOS are on their way, and they will be the first real competitors Microsoft has had in years. Valve could really take a chunk out of them. It's a massive potential market, and you've got all the people who don't want to pay a monthly subscription to use the computer they already own. All the people just sick of Microsoft in general. And so while Microsoft is more massive than ever before, it's also in danger of collapsing entirely. If it did, it would teach all the other companies a huge lesson. You can decay your platform as much as you like, whether that's selling software or just selling chocolate bars. But if you ever get any real competition again though, and there's no AI bailout to save you, then you can lose everything.
From launch to legendary with Shopify. Sell more with the world's best converting checkout and turn analytics into opportunities so you can scale further, faster. Take your business to a whole new level. Switch to Shopify. Start your free trial today.
K2 at 28,251 feet, or 8,611 meters, K2 is the second highest mountain on Earth. But if you ask anyone who knows anything about mountains, K2 is the true king of the 8,000 meter peaks. The little bit that it lacks in height is more than made up for in every other respect that makes a mountain difficult and dangerous. The slopes are steeper, the weather is worse, and the climbing is more technical. It's for this reason that despite having less than a tenth of the ascents of Everest, K2 has more than a third of the deaths. So in this video, we're going to look at why K2 is considered one of the most difficult and dangerous mountains on Earth, and the impossible first attempts to conquer it. Today's video is sponsored by Babbel, one of the top language learning apps in the world. If you've been following my channel long enough, you probably know I'm Canadian, and because of this, I took French in school for many, many years. Around a year ago, when Babbel first reached out to me, and after years of being out of school, I could barely put together a single sentence in because of how out of practice. This is why the for being a far greater challenge. It's often even called the most difficult or most
Zealand. Whether you're strolling along the crystal blue coastlines or hiking up her snow-covered peaks, it is paradise on Earth. If that wasn't enough, New Zealand ranks as one of the best places in the world for both health and happiness. This is heaven on Earth. So why is everyone desperate to leave?
People are leaving the country in record numbers.
It's the highest ever recorded for an annual period.
Unemployment's rising, it's getting hard to find jobs out there.
It's going to be hard for all of us to find a place that kind of help us grow as people.
We're seeing the same thing happening all across the West. For the first time in history, people are desperately leaving paradise. From South Korea to California and the UK to New Zealand, it's a global movement. And just stop for a moment. Think about how many of your friends, family, and the people you know that are thinking of leaving or have already left. How many times do you catch yourself in dismay at where your country and where your city is going? Do you ever think about how much more fulfilled, happier, and connected you'd be if you maybe just left it all behind? Wherever I go in the West, I look around and I'm really shocked at what's going on. And it led me to think, why is this happening everywhere? Why is this happening all at once? And why is this happening now? The problem just gets so much worse the more you look at those questions, as these aren't just any people leaving. They're often our best and brightest. The majority of people leaving are young, working adults. The generation that drives economic growth is losing hope and checking out. If you ask a politician why this is happening, you would get a lot of different answers. Recently, New Zealand's Prime Minister Chris Luxon was asked why people should stay in his country.
In the future, if I work hard, I can get ahead. I can move around my country feeling safe. I can actually get a great education for my kids. Parents can get healthcare, so that's what we've got.
If you work hard, you can get ahead. People want to feel safe, get a good education, and get healthcare. These are the reasons he highlights for young people to stay. But people naturally disagree with this. People working good jobs simply don't have enough to live anymore. New Zealanders have been charged so much for groceries, the supermarkets are now facing charges over alleged price gouging, along with other predatory practices. Meanwhile, regular people working pay the costs and see none of the returns ever. In lots of ways, they're the lucky ones. Especially for young people, unemployment has been rising in New Zealand. Some people have been forced to leave because they simply cannot find a good job in their home country.
It wasn't our first option to leave New Zealand, and it's been really challenging to try to find a job. And he received a few offers from Australia, so we just have to, do what is right for our family.
Echten Waldviertler Genuss, den gibt's bei der Backwelt Pilz. Seit Generationen sind wir im Waldviertel zu Hause und stellen hier hochwertiges Brot und Gebäck her. Aus überwiegend regionalen Rohstoffen und 100% österreichischem Getreide. So halten wir Transportwege kurz. Wir arbeiten ausschließlich mit umweltfreundlichem Strom. Rund 30% davon produzieren wir sogar selbst. Auf einer Kollektorfläche von fast 6.900 Quadratmetern erzeugen wir mit über 3.200 PV-Modulen bis zu 1.500 Kilowatt Peak CO2-neutral Solarstrom. Auch die
But before we continue, something crazy is happening on the 2nd of December. You see, Agent Opus is running a live experiment where an AI editor will go head-to-head with real human creators. They'll have the same brief and the same amount of time, where 60 seconds of video has to be made from scratch in 1 hour. And you get to watch the whole thing unfold live, including the mistakes, where they'll be judged by editors like Hayden Hillier-Smith. It's going to be interesting because, for context, the kind of video Agent Opus can generate in about an hour would normally take a human editor 6 to 8 hours minimum, when you include all the cutting, pacing, and motion graphics. And yes, the AI motion graphics will be a big part of this. The titles, the transitions, the visual beats that would usually slow everything down just happen automatically. They'll be running multiple matchups. One of the edits will be a commentary video breaking down Coca-Cola using AI in their ads. The other will be a clean explainer on the history of Santa Claus. These videos are two totally different styles with the same constraints: technical quality, creativity, and storytelling. So it's not just about speed, it's about whether the output actually holds up, and whether AI editing agents can match up to teams of professional editors. Editors like Daniel Patel and Sebastian Jeffries and his editor. There's also a contest running alongside this event where you can pick who you think's going to win, human or AI. If you're right, you can win rewards and early access. And if nothing else, you get a front row seat to see where this stuff is genuinely at right now. So if you want to watch it live or take part in the contest, go to the link in the description below. Because even if you are skeptical about AI editing, this is one of those moments where it's worth seeing the comparison play out in real time. For others, it's the cost of housing that's pushed them over the edge. While rents have fallen recently, thanks in large part to the exodus, wages still have a lot of catching up to do. This is often the problem. Price hikes for groceries, bills, and everything else haven't been met by rising wages. So living skyrockets, people get less out of life. And in 2024, wages grew by less than half of inflation in New Zealand. Like most in the West, the country's population is also aging rapidly, with fertility rates at 1.58 births per woman, well below the replacement rates. They, like every other Western country, have used immigration to mask their own challenges, but this isn't holding up and doesn't incentivize young people born in the country to even stay. Last year, 30,000 more people left New Zealand for Australia than came back. It's the biggest loss in over a decade, and most were under 30. Young professionals skilled with a decade of experience at home. There are now 600,000 New Zealand-born people living in Australia, with wages around 33% higher on average and sometimes double what they are at home. Meaning moving across the sea is just a no-brainer for those who can afford it. But don't get me wrong, Australia has its own housing crisis and cost of living problems, as we've spoken about before. But the wages there do broadly keep up, though this will likely change if people keep arriving from overseas. So right now, it might be among the last Western countries where you can climb the ladder without being a genius entrepreneur or having family money. How long that lasts is yet another question. So you do get the sense that something bigger is missing in modern Western life. It feels like society is grossly failing to meet our expectations. People just don't feel fulfilled, and our modern consumerist lives can't fill that gap. Politicians might point to this emptiness, but they can never offer a real concrete solution, because New Zealand is far from alone here. Last year, over 500,000 Brits left the UK. Nearly 40% of young professionals aged 25 to 34 are actively planning to leave in the next 5 years. IT workers, healthcare workers, teachers, these are the people who make a country function, who create the culture to begin with. Some head to Dubai, through salaries and consumerist luxury, where wealth is the culture and authoritarian safety keeps the streets clean. Dubai has 250,000 Brits now, rising sharply over the past decade. If you're wealthy, Dubai is a consumerist paradise. Luxury villas, pools, it's an adult playground. There is no political wokeness, no cancel culture, no high taxes, just easy living in a barren desert. Where all of your desires will be catered to regardless of law, unless you're one of the millions of migrant workers who build the place. But the question is, why leave the beautiful UK for that? The UK, like so many others in the West, has become an extractive society. Money funneled to London and the elites who buy more assets and increase control while taxing the rest. The damage of this is visible everywhere. Proud buildings and prosperous neighborhoods sucked dry and left to rot. Beautiful old towns completely abandoned. Churches sold to the rich while the community is completely destroyed. High rents and less disposable income have killed British towns and villages. You walk around and it's just people loitering in Turkish barbershops. And the US is starting to see the same thing. Californians are leaving in record numbers. Some to Texas, but others to Mexico. You walk through any of Mexico City's expat neighborhoods and it looks like what LA pretends to be. Clean, sunny streets, walkable and with a real... And of course, everything else is a fraction of the cost. The prices in Condesa or Roma Norte are cheaper than equivalent areas in the US, though obviously much more expensive than the poorer parts of the city. The streets are clean and sunny with trees lining the sidewalks. Everything is walkable and crime is somehow pretty low in these areas. The biggest difference though is really in the community itself. The atmosphere in these neighborhoods is just different. People are lively, happier, and willing to actually talk to each other. Just living and working in the same neighborhood instead of commuting an hour each way is a massive improvement on Western life already. There are independent coffee shops and restaurants everywhere, at just seemingly normal prices. And these are all signs that there's a thriving local economy. Real neighborhood businesses run by real people, and it gives the area life, making it feel like an actual community rather than just a collection of isolated units, an endless suburban sprawl.
Ein neuer Fall für die 3 Fragezeichen.
Expedition zur Toteninsel? Los, Jungs! Es geht darum, das Rätsel zu lösen. 4-3, gemeinsam.
Die 3 Fragezeichen, Toteninsel, ab 22. Januar im Kino.
Dein Start ins neue Jahr wird günstig mit Bipa. Entdecke Bipa-Markenqualität unter 2 Euro. Wie die B-Care Cremedusche Mandel-Magnolie um nur 99 Cent. Top-Qualität zum Top-Preis. Außerdem unsere Markenaktionen. Minus 25% auf alle Gesichtspflege- und Schminkprodukte von L'Oréal Paris. Sowie minus 25% auf alle Produkte von Finish. Und unsere Wochenaktion. Minus 25% auf alle Babyprodukte von 8. bis 14. Jänner. Bipa. Einfach preiswert.
Of course, the Westerners who move to places like this are often just living in a bubble to some extent, leveraging their Western salaries with savings to afford it back. But that's exactly the point. You're getting a better deal, a better quality of life for the same money or less. You just feel generally happier in life. But here's where this mass exodus from the West gets strange and unexpected. You know the obvious candidates: Australia, Thailand, Mexico, and Canada. But it seems like today, people are more regularly leaving Western countries for Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Vietnam, and Albania. A Polish think tank recently found that fewer people are heading to the West, and more Western migrants are actually coming into Poland. Videos on Instagram and TikTok show stunningly clean, beautiful, modern, and cosmopolitan cities full of vibrancy. And similar to Mexico to the US, the culture seems alive when at home it's dying. 20 years ago, suggesting that someone would leave London for Albania or somewhere like Warsaw or Bucharest would have been insane. Albania was what people were supposed to be fleeing from. Over a third of their population, 1.5 million people, emigrated in 25 years. Poverty, crime, and the Albanian mafia all once coloured people's perception of it. Now, Albania is one of the safest countries in Europe. All while the mafia criminals emigrated to the West. And it's the same situation in Croatia, Bulgaria, Lithuania. Even recently war-torn countries like Bosnia are safer most. A one-bed in Europe costs €500. In London, at least 1,800 easily. Same quality of life, sometimes much better. You've got better romantic interests, more community, and a general sense of happiness and ease. In South Asia, the difference is even more stark. In Thailand's Chiang Mai, you can live comfortably for well under $1,000 a month and have an amazing lifestyle. It's why we always see these videos of Bangkok's insane skyline on your Instagram or TikTok feed. But it's not all just about affordability and culture. Nearly half of UK expats say their mental health improved within 6 months of leaving. What you realise is that they're not running away, they're just running towards something the West can no longer provide. The calculation has flipped. Countries we look down on are actually outcompeting the West on safety, affordability, community, and quality of life. Clearly, there's something brewing here other than economics. This feels like a symptom of something deeper and more systemic under the surface. Our modern societies, the most advanced economies on the planet, are simply not delivering on expectations. There's a fatal mismatch between what they expected to be and actually are. There's this common theory called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a pyramid showing what humans need to thrive, not just survive. At the bottom, food, water, shelter. One level up, safety, stable job, healthcare. Next, community, belonging, connection. Above that, respect, achievement, purpose. And at the top, self-actualization, realizing your potential and finding meaning. Western societies in the 70s and 80s were moving up this pyramid, and they often compared themselves to others. One of the core principles of the US was the pursuit to happiness. And of course, Western countries participated in the Renaissance. They industrialized earlier than most, and people from the middle and upper classes grew richer and richer. A postman or truck driver could afford a house on one income, where they felt secure and had time for community and meaning. Marriages were stronger because there was less financial stress. This was the promise we'd all been working for. We'd moved beyond survival and we were meant to thrive. But somewhere down the line, the West started sliding backwards. Self-actualization has transpired to mean working too many hours, having no time for any sense of community, living completely spread out from one another in boxes, and just having no energy for meaning when you become exhausted from surviving, just collapsing in your bed watching reels. Actualizing oneself means waiting forever to get through education and work, and then finally struggling to meet someone to eventually have a family sometime in your late 30s.
Alles muss ich hier selber machen. Ich finde einfach keine passenden Mitarbeitenden. Aber das hält fit. Absicht. Auch Absicht.
Indeed, statt Ausreden. Jetzt die richtigen Mitarbeitenden finden und 75 € Startguthaben sichern. Mit Indeed hast du's im Griff.
Jano-Preiswecker und sicher dir den besten Preis.
Or even your 40s, you'll struggle with money and struggle to retire with the possibility of 50-year mortgages. This situation would have been unthinkable not that long ago. You'd have kids at 20, retiring before 60, leaving a good 20 years of relative freedom to enjoy, all while living with meaningful connections around you. But Western societies today are failing to deliver the promise they made. We're supposed to be at the top of the pyramid, and that's when you realize the cost of living isn't all about money. It's what you're willing to pay financially, emotionally, psychologically, even spiritually to live in a Western country. That cost-benefit analysis has reached a tipping point. We pay so much and get just less and less out of it. It's a serious case of diminishing returns. People are calculating. I can barely survive, I have no community, I have no purpose, I have no real true friends, everything's transactional, and I have no future. So why am I paying this price, along with heavy taxation? This is simply why young people are just leaving the West altogether. And it's not just one country here, it's every Western society that's heading this way. But some are much more advanced and show us
Schlecht zu lieben, noch Energy holen.
Take South Korea, where there are massive obstacles for people born poor. You see it in education. Everyone has a right to free education. The tests are so strict and passing grades are so tight that most are locked out of top universities, and therefore the best jobs. The richest can buy them. For everyone else, you need evening classes, the hard one. Regular kids finish school at 4 or 5, then have another 4 to 6. Tuition for the best hog ones is incredibly expensive. Lower income families spend nearly as much on private education as on food. You can't afford the top hog one? Well, that's a